there's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. We're here today with Kati Ryan. She is the founder and CEO of A Positive Adventure. Kati, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Logan. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I am really excited to have you on the show. A mutual connection of ours connected us a while back. And so we've been meaning to do this. And I'm excited to dive into this topic of how sales training can really help eliminate churn for a lot of organizations. It's a challenge, large and small teams are facing. So really excited to dive into that and have you share some of your insights with us. Before we do that, Kati, I would love for you to share with our listeners what you and the team at A Positive Adventure are up to these days.
Certainly. So A Positive Adventure is an L&D consultancy, and we work with companies to help them crack the training nuts. The way we view it is that training should not be a four-letter word. Training can and it should drive behaviors while still matching to the needs of the ever-distracted learner. We all have devices in our pockets. We're all distracted on an ongoing basis. So whether or not a company is looking for new hire training, sexual harassment training, management training, we guide the company and the employees on a successful and positive learning adventure. And oftentimes that does focus on sales training, which is what we're here to talk about today.
I love it. Yeah, more and more distracted. The devices have made it from our pockets to our wrists so that we can't even put them away these days, right?
Exactly. I think it's 9 seconds, we ask ourselves, is this a good use of my time? And when you think about that, we live in this bullet pointed, Slack communicating, emoji using, multi-screen viewing, ever distracted society. And so it's really important that when we think about learning and training a staff, that we match to the needs of the ever distracted learner.
Yeah, talk about some decision fatigue. I don't think I've heard anyone really sum it up as well as you just did with that hyphenated explanation on how stinking distracted that we truly are. So thinking about that, if you're training a group of people and a team of salespeople, thinking about that when you're determining how to train and structure ongoing development for them, I think is just, it just makes sense. We have to think about the world that they're living in. So I wanted to open it up, Kati, with this stat that you mentioned, 30% of employees voluntarily leaving an organization in the first 6 months and some of the reasons that they cite. Tell us a little bit about some of the research you've looked at here and some of your findings working with organizations.
Yeah, so that's such a scary statistic as an organization, because if they're voluntarily leaving in the first 6 months, oftentimes by the 6-month time frame, we consider them to be ramped. We're hoping, especially in the sales capacity, that they're close, if not ramping to their goal. And the 3 main reasons that employees cite, number 1 is a poor onboarding experience. Number 2 is a lack of understanding on what they need to do to be successful in their role. What are the expectations of their given role? And the last one is a less than ideal manager. So we've probably all seen that Gallup statistic from back in the day that says, over 50% of people leave a manager, not an organization. And so while these three things are, and that statistic is pretty scary to think about, the good news is that we can control for all three of these things. And it does start with our new hire training, our ramp plans, buttoning those up and making sure that employees don't have that sense of, cognitive dissonance or, oh my gosh, what did I do? Why am I here? When they join, we can demystify all of that through a structured new hire training program and ramp plan. And then the third one is obviously sales leadership. And so making sure that we're developing our leaders.
Mm-hmm. So tell me your thoughts a little bit more on the poor onboarding experience. And this might cross over into the lack of understanding on how to be successful because, I've heard it said, and I completely agree, sales is the ultimate meritocracy. Aside from sports, it's, there's a score, there's quota, there's attainment or not. But it seems like these reasons being cited still point to the fact that onboarding and setting up sales reps for success might not be as crystal clear as we might like to think these days.
Yeah, I think that's, it's kind of the $1 million question. How do we ramp the sales team as quickly and efficiently as possible while not making them feel like we're feeding them through a fire hose? But I think, going back to your question about what is the onboarding experience, it starts before training. It starts with recruiting, making sure that recruiters and the leaders who are interviewing this individual are setting expectations early on about what is going to be included in the new hire training program, what is going to be expected of them ramp wise. And so I really do think that it starts way before they step foot into the building or if they're remote, before they open their laptop. So yeah, I think it's, it is a comprehensive package where training is a big piece of that.
Mm-hmm. I think you make a great point there. Something that is talked about in the sales acceleration formula is, matching salespeople to the industry and the buyer that you sell to. I think something important that you mentioned there is matching the sales rep to the culture and the expectations that they're going to be stepping into. And that's going to happen before their first day, right? I can't see how that's a bad idea. So tell us a little bit about some of the tools you've seen successful teams use to help with this onboarding process and setting new reps up for success.
Sure. So I think there's some tools and then there's also just learning methodologies that are important. The biggest thing here is that the old adage of if you don't use it, you lose it. And so we spend $60 million a year on training, and 70% of that is forgotten in 24 hours. And then 90% of that is forgotten in 1 week. And so that's exhausting to think about. And so what that means is what we do after training is actually more important than what we do during training. How are we empowering the sales team to do the things right after training to make sure they're retaining it? And so we can do that in various ways. So we can use tools for that. We can use methodologies for that. Blended learning is the way we approach this. So there's in classroom time as well as out of classroom time, like on the job time. And that can be in a safe space, sandbox environment, role play environment before you transition into the real world environment. And so I think when you think about learning programs, especially for sales teams, it's the first day that they start, they don't need to know how to generate a contract in Salesforce. Let's back up here. Let's go back to, okay, what's our value proposition? How are you going to, if you're on the phone, how are you going to pique the interest of the person that answers the phone, get to who you need to, all those types of things that have to happen. And even if they have years and years of sales experience, the way that your organization or an organization does it is different and unique. And they hopefully have tried and true practices. And if they don't, let's figure those out. What does success look like? What does that ideal look like? And then you can match in using subject matter experts and any tools they currently have, and you can weave those into a blended program. There are a few really great tools out there. One that is a favorite of mine is called Lessonly. And Lessonly allows you to actually submit videos. So you can set up a whole learning program in there for new hires where, somebody can say, ring, ring, this is Katie. And then the person has to respond with whatever it is that they've learned that day, how to set an appointment, maybe how to close on the appointment. And then you can go in and give coaching and feedback. So they learn in the classroom, and then they have homework and a tool such as Lessonly to really drive it home before, we turn them loose in the wild.
It's story time again, and we're talking about search engine marketing. Today, I'm going to tell you about a challenge within Pelican Case's B2B division. Pelican needed a partner with deep B2B expertise that could get them a massive bump in leads from their pay-per-click campaigns without increasing spend. After vetting a handful of agencies, they decided to go with Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency located in Southern California. Directive took on this challenge by refining their targeting and building custom landing pages for their advertising efforts. Once implemented, they saw a 208% increase in conversion rate. Needless to say, Pelican Cases met their initiative. And I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Do you see a lot of sales teams specifically using tools like this to replace the in-person role playing? Role playing's, at least in my career, has always been a big part of internal sales training. Do you see the way that role playing is being approached, either just from a strategic standpoint or tactically with the tools being used, that's changing a lot these days, or is it a lot the same? Just the format for it being with maybe a tool like Lessonly instead of amongst your peers, is that kind of replacing that, or is it being layered on top of in person within your peers role playing and stuff like that with some of the teams you see, Katie?
Great question. So I do not think that role play will ever go away. Sorry, sales teams. Role play will always be there. I think, when we look at it, and especially in new hire capacity, we do it's called scaffolding in learning and development. So you give them little things along the way, skills that they practice along the way in small chunks. So they master each thing individually before they put it all together. And so when you think about this in terms of what you're asking, let's say it's a cold call. Okay. So we want them to really nail that cold call. So we teach them about how to do that. We give them scripts and tools and things that they can use and make their own. Then maybe they have a lesson that they have to complete in Lessonly on cold calling. Just the cold calling piece. They do practice in the classroom, role playing with each other, but then they have to submit it into the tool. And what we see is something that you can never quite get with role play, but on average, people are recording it 8 to 10 times before they submit it. And so when you think about practice and redundancy, that's something that you can't emulate in the classroom that many times before people just get bored. So knowing that they own it, they're submitting it, their boss and maybe their boss's boss can view this video of them that's now in the tool, it does set a little bit of a different precedent. And so I don't think role playing goes away. So the way that I recommend doing this is you do scaffolding. So you do cold calling, and then let's say, depending on the sales process, then you've got a discovery call, and then you've got to, figure out how to ask good questions and layer in questions. And all of those things can be broken down into micro learning or tiny chunks where it's just like, we want you to master each of these individually, and then we can put them all together. And so like a big role play, like board certification with their manager could happen at the end of the onboarding experience where they put all of those things together in one fell swoop as a role play scenario, like with a manager or something like that.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense in how just the difference in using a tool like that for submitting your role play can work differently than an interpersonal environment. Like you said, people get bored, but whatever we're doing, if we're learning to hit a baseball or make a cold call, it's about repetition in order to get things to sink in. So taking advantage of some of the technology that we have that makes that doable and fits the way that we learn, I think is such a great idea. So let's go back real quick, Katie, to that third piece, that less than ideal manager, sales leadership. Obviously, the development of those sales leaders, as well as mapping who's on what team, those sorts of things can be controlled. As you mentioned, it's not all doom and gloom. These are things that we can control. What do you see as some of the things that effective sales teams are doing to eliminate that piece of the less than ideal manager, let's use that euphemism, in eliminating people churn on their sales team?
Yeah, I think it's making sure that we are consistently investing in those people leaders. So the sales leadership team, they need to be aligned with each other, and they need to understand what the expectation, going back to expectation setting, what is expected of them to align and to support the individuals on their team, as well as aligning with the overall organizational goals and things like that. And so what I see a lot of times is that employers will hire sales leaders who have sales leadership experience, which is great. They can bring so much to the table. But what they lack sometimes is they don't align the team across the board on what is our management operating rhythm, or what is our standard operating procedure here for when we hire somebody. What are we going to do with them? And making sure that all the managers are in alignment and that they know how to give good feedback and coach in the moment and structure good one-on-ones and team meetings and just things like that. Maybe we don't have to go to a 101 level if it's a seasoned manager, but making sure that they understand the way that it will be done at said organization, I think is incredibly important for alignment, because then it trickles down to the rep level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see how that consistency can make for better results. Katie, this has been a great conversation. I love the tools as well as the strategies that you shared here. If anybody listening to this would like to follow up with you, stay connected, maybe learn more about A Positive Adventure, what's the best way for them to reach out?
So you can always go to apositiveadventure.com. That's our website. And you could email Katie at apositiveadventure.com, and that's KATI at apositiveadventure.com. That's directly to me. And you're welcome to add me on LinkedIn. But if you want to learn more about what we do, the website is the best way to get that information.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing some practical stuff for our listeners today, Katie. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Thanks, Logan. I appreciate it.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.